This video has been made to support A-level photographers in their personal investigation unit, which they will be taking throughout their A-level Year 12 and Year 13. This particular unit is themed around how artists and photographers use graphic processes and approaches through photography, and was very much the personal choice of this student's investigation. Hopefully this will give you a little bit of support, especially those of you who are on lockdown at the moment and wondering how things will change and what will happen. And hopefully when we get back to normality, this will also be of some help to you as well. It's being recorded whilst wearing a poncho, of course. In the video, we'll have images from this student's sketchbook, images of the sheets, the essay, and what I call the essential sheets, which we get all students in our centre to create as part of their coursework unit. It's also got some images from their outcomes as well as other parts of the work, which hopefully you will find will support you and give you ideas for your own. This won't give you an exact recipe to follow because every student's work is intended to be different and personal to them. In the case of this student, they wanted to pursue graphic design as an idea for a career, so they wanted to involve that in their A-level investigation. This image on the screen shows the rough coursework content which the student completed at the end of their A-level investigation. My students in the centre that I teach tend to start their work from late January to February onwards, so nearly getting up to a year's worth of investigation into their personal theme. But that can vary within school to school. As long as you start this and it's all based on your personal ideas and you're prepared to investigate, then you will be fine. The essential sheets part is just elaborated in this next image, and this is A2 size sheets that students complete on Photoshop, or you can do it on PowerPoint, whatever you like, that then basically explains each assessment objective quickly for the examiner when they come in to review and moderate your work. It also helps teachers to generate an idea of marks and supports the sketchbook element of the work. The rationale sheet, there's a detailed personal summary. The content shows a chronological order of sequences of images, really good for AO3 and AO2. The rationale look very good for AO4 and AO1, which is the ideas and the research connected with your personal theme. The outcome sheet, very good for AO4, showing those final outcomes, what they mean, how they're presented, and the connection sheet, that often works in combination with the essay really well because it shows how each different inspiration and artist that you've looked at impacts on your investigation and your theme. The first page of the student's personal investigation, and they've just put together some ideas onto a little PowerPoint slide for each assessment objective and just showing what their ideas are. Now obviously this is an early stage in the investigation and things do change and develop, and you need to be prepared for that in your investigation. Don't set out to expecting to be getting X, Y and Z by studying A, B and C. The examiners want to see breadth of investigation, when you've had problems and how things change as they move on. They don't expect you just to do a list of stuff and then complete it. This next page, that's showing a mood board, and it's often good to use Pinterest or Google to just generate a load of ideas and images together that are roughly in line with your theme to start to inspire and generate your own ideas for investigation. On the right hand side, this is how my students put together research using analysing considerations, thinking about props, and this forms the basis of their research as well as giving them information to start putting into their essay when they start to write that. This next page again shows another couple of different images that the student initially picked out to investigate throughout their coursework, and again follows the same format as the previous slide that you've seen. This page goes into a little bit more detail onto which artists are going to form the rough basis of their intentions, and also a little project plan on the right hand side, but it is just a plan. Do expect to stray from it, but the examiners love to see diagrams and ideas generated for what you intend to do. Following that, the student then gets straight into taking portraits, which they needed to start to generate as a base for graphic ideas and processes which their work was intended to explore. As the work was concerned with graphic processes, they looked for something which was quite straightforward to start off with, which was typography, and they used different processes and images associated with that to inspire their first parts of development. In this case, it was using the portraits that the students had taken in combination with text and approaches on Photoshop to mix text and imagery together. This double page shows really clear pathway through their investigation, how they did things on Photoshop using print screens and also using other techniques such as the brush tool and pattern stamping to change the way that their typography developed. The student then wanted to attempt to use different ways of developing, not just using Photoshop processes. So they physically worked onto the face of the model that they were photographing using different bits of writing, hopefully using a body sensitive paint. If you haven't, make sure you do a skin test first, and then using those images that they'd taken with the text on the face and then applying them to the same typography processes. Investigations then move on, where the student printed off the images of different portraits that they corrected and then worked into them with paint, with fine liners, with pens, to add in different words and different texts that were relevant to each person that they photographed, to build up a more accurate portrait, arguably, than just using a standalone portrait. This next page shows different developments where they've used layering of different images that they scanned in of the things where they'd worked into physically into the shapes and portraits, along with originals and portraits that they developed with typography on Photoshop. On the right hand side, they printed off different outcomes that they've made so far and created drop shots where they laid out each one of their different outcomes on the table into different arrangements and then photographed them so the different arrangements could possibly lead to something else on Photoshop. On this double page, it shows how the person's drop shot developments have then been layered back over the top, then using layer modes, eraser tools, magic eraser, polygonal lasso, they've cut away and revealed different layers to create a more complex layered idea where the graphic processes and graphic portraits all impact differently onto each portrait they're layered into. This page that details collage joiners is just showing how each different development and process so far is then combined together to create other possible avenues and directions for the coursework. As these pages progress, the student starts to use physical as well as digital collage to create their own outcomes. This page shows how the student has used tracing paper over the top of some of their portraits to start to create a layered mask to then work into on Photoshop later on. This page then shows how that mask and how those different words that were drawn to the tracing paper are then used as layers over the top. All the time the student is trying to mix together the graphic nature of artwork and then photography together, which is in line with her theme. This double page is a showcase showing just the two selected images that were taken from the previous investigation and just presenting it without annotation, just as a way of showing which images you prefer. Then as things move on, the student finds new techniques to develop using this colour splash technique, using a mixture of layers, paintbrushes, rendered textures to add to the aesthetic quality as well as the theme and the context in what she's creating, hiding text into different layers and using techniques to create unusual outcomes. The techniques are then applied to different portraits that the student has taken so far to really try and push and refine and extend those ideas. So don't just do one thing and finish it. The best thing to do is to keep pushing away at things and refine them to the best level that they can then go to. This next page shows print screen breakdowns of how the student has achieved each step along with artist connections. So as well as showing the AO1, those artist connections of what you're doing, it presents AO2 as well because it's showing how you followed that idea, experimented and then refined with that idea. This page really full, really vibrant, looking at sort of which were the most successful techniques that they've used and then reflecting on what's then going to come next. The student then looks at other artists there in the bottom right as well as explaining which processes they've preferred to use the most. This page may seem a little bit random in that it's not from a portrait that they have taken so far, but this was based from a painting that they had made of a celebrity, which they then transferred and worked into using different graphic processes as a means to then try and get other dimensions into the work. It also gave the student a chance to try something different and experiment with other avenues in the investigation before moving on and getting back into the photographs that were then taken. The student also uses Illustrator as well as Photoshop to build up layers of text onto different layers to then experiment with, what is more effective, showing the more graphic element or the more photographic element in terms of making a successful portrait. This image on the left was the selected outcome, which shows a mixture of more graphic styles really than the photography element, but that's what she then selected and then explained in the text on the right hand side. She then applies those processes back into the photographs that she's taken from previous sets to see how they will work. In this term of using expressive painting as well as the photographs together, she didn't select that as the main idea, but they proved as very useful layered textures to then develop on with following those different processes. On the right hand side there where it says idea 3, the student then uses polyportraits, which is a popular technique used in advertising branding a lot of the time, where it totally changes the original photographic sense into a broken down graphicized image, which seemed to be relevant to her investigation at the time. She then mixes the polyportraits with the photographic layers and also the typography experiments that she'd done to create these different, more simplified portraits that then extended the idea further. She also looks at an artist called Johnny Crash, who she then found who's quite relevant to the more glitchy, unusual graphic element to then what she was producing, alongside showing the photographic texture of portraits. A couple of showcase pages follow, which are then backed up with linking her previous work to her current investigation, and the image on the right hand side there starts to show how she's then looking at the balance between graphics and photography in the work she's making. This page here, even though it's a little blurry, you can get the idea from what she's trying to do. She's looked at an artist called Jiri Kohler, who splits up images into almost barcode compositions of formats, where she then uses different selections taken of each different little sort of strand or strip, and then she then combines those together to make different combinations of images. This way, more literally combining photographic and graphic images together, not just layering conventionally how she's done previously. She then goes back to photography. It's been a while since she's then taken a set of work she's been very much developing, but this shows how she's trying to get different layers influenced by the artist's inspiration, using layers of cut paper to then photograph and then create other layers, then develop and mix over her photographic images of portraits. Each one of those images there of the cut shapes are then layered back into portraits on Photoshop, which she then explains on the right hand side there. So don't forget to explain what you're doing and why, how that connects to artist images and your theme. That's really crucial throughout. This page is showing the different manipulations that she'd made physically, cutting into paper in real life, that way creating shadows and different surfaces which you can't easily create on Photoshop and might look a little bit tenuous if you were to do so. So mixing together definitely and directly the physical layering and the digital layering. This double page shows another little bit of experimentation using paper layering and portraits, where she then extends the shadow idea and the different areas of relief a little bit further. And this image shows a selection of outcomes where she mixes all of the different graphic layers with the photography layers and digital polyportraits that she'd made. The next couple of pages show selected outcomes or different experiments into different textures before then attempting a final piece, which was based on one of the first artists that she looked at, Christina Krog, I don't know how to quite pronounce it, and that was one of the things that she then picked as very much a graphic outcome. The rest of the images that are in this post are all just showing the different sheets that she'd made, some of the physical manipulations she'd then created, as well as then the outcomes that she'd recorded. The next few slides are showing the students' essay pages as they broke down. The essay itself has to be around 3,000 words in length, but it's always best to make sure that that essay is about your work. Don't try and make it about something separate, and do expect it to change and to be added to throughout the course of your A-level. Make sure you bounce it backwards and forwards between your teachers so they can be giving you advice, and always make sure that you're explaining the outcomes and the different ways that you've investigated through the work, because it's often the thing which the examiner will read first. So it's essential. You can't have a portfolio coursework unit without it. I normally suggest my students keep a separate copy inside their books, either in a plastic wallet in the front of their books, as well as multiple copies for the examiner to read when they come round and when they're moderating. It really is essential that you put the time in with this essay and proofread it. Don't just try and do it in the last 2 weeks of the course. It will definitely go wrong for you. I hope this video has been helpful for you, and if you have any questions, please message me the channel. Unfortunately, I can't send you copies of the essays or any copies of the work due to data protection, which is the enemy of us all. So good luck, and in this corona crisis time, I wish you all the best. Goodbye.